Good evening. Welcome to World Today. I'm Shreya Upadhyay. In the next 60 minutes, we get you updates from India and across the world, starting with the big takeaways from Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States and Egypt. He's back home, but we'll talk about why these two visits were significant. We'll also get you more on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the latest situation from Sudan. First, let's quickly get you the headlines that we are tracking on World Today. Prime Minister Narendra Modi concludes his visit to United States and Egypt. Both mark a significant step in strengthening India's bilateral relations with the two nations. From defense and tech deals to collaboration in the fields of space, the big takeaways reflect India's priorities. Russia seeks to restore calm after an aborted mutiny by the Wagner Group mercenaries. Monday declared a non-working day in Moscow to allow time for things to settle. There was little evidence of increased security in the capital. Russia's neighboring countries increase security on their border as the dust settles over the Wagner mutiny. Finland and the Baltic states closely monitoring the situation. EU's foreign ministers to meet to discuss the latest and coordinate a response. Greece's Kyriakos Mitsotakis wins second term after New Democracy Party clinches landslide election victory. Conservatives score their widest margin in almost 50 years as voters reward them for nursing Greece back to economic health. In Sudan, fighting surges in Khartoum, Bahri and Omdurman as the conflict between the warring sides enters its 11th week. Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces seized the main base of a heavily armed police unit in the capital. Ceasefire talks in Jeddah suspended last week. All right, let's start with the big news that we are tracking on DD India. From defense and technology deals to collaboration in the fields of space exploration to cancer research, the focus of the meetings between Indian and American leaders was this. DD India correspondent Kate Fisher reports from Washington, D.C.
Addressing reporters in the East Room of the White House, US President Joe Biden said that the US and India are collaborating on nearly every human endeavour. Speaking from a podium next to him, Prime Minister Modi said that even the sky was not the limit to their partnership, announcing that India has joined the US-led Artemis Accords on space exploration and that they would work with NASA on a joint mission to the International Space Station next year. The two countries have also agreed to collaborate on new technology to fight cancer. US and Indian scientists will develop an artificial intelligence-enabled digital pathology platform for cancer diagnosis and automated radiotherapy treatment for cancers of the cervix, head and neck. The US is also going to make it easier for skilled Indian workers to get and renew US visas. It also intends to open 2 new consulates in India, while India will open its consulate in the US city of Seattle later this year and is due to announce 2 more new US consulates. Student exchanges will increase too. Last year, the US issued a record 125,000 visas to Indian students, and Indian students now are on pace to become the largest foreign student community in the US, with a 20% increase last year alone. President Joe Biden said that he addressed India's record on human rights with Mr. Modi in their meeting and that they had a, quote, straightforward discussion. Well, asked by a US reporter about what steps he would take to improve the rights of Muslims and other minorities in India, Prime Minister Modi said, quote, "There's absolutely no space for discrimination in India." Kate Fisher reporting for DD India in Washington.
Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Egypt marked a significant step in strengthening the bilateral relations between India and Egypt. PM Modi's Egypt visit reflected the commitment to strengthening the historical and cultural ties that bind India and Egypt. paving the way for a stronger partnership and shared prosperity in the years ahead. Let's take a look at the highlights of the second day of PM Modi's visit in Cairo.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi embarked on a historic journey to Egypt, marking the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 26 years. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was a testament to the deepening bilateral ties between India and Egypt. The meeting served as a platform to strengthen economic and diplomatic relations. The leaders discussed ways to further deepen the partnership between the two countries, including in trade and investment, defense and security, renewable energy, cultural and people-to-people ties. An agreement to elevate the bilateral relationship to a strategic partnership was signed by the leaders. 3 MOUs in the fields of agriculture, archaeology and antiquities and competition law were also signed by the two leaders.
It was very clear from those discussions and the MOU and the agreements that were signed later on that the two leaders gave particular focus on enhancing the political and security cooperation, defense collaboration, trade and investment ties, scientific and academic collaboration, and strengthening of people-to-people ties.
Prime Minister began his second day at the prestigious Al-Hakim Mosque. As he walked through the sacred halls, one can't help but be captivated by the mosque's architectural splendor, which reverberates with centuries of rich heritage and cultural significance. Through this historic journey, Prime Minister Modi not only celebrated the past but also paved the way for a brighter future. His presence at the Al-Hakim Mosque signified a profound appreciation for the cultural treasures of Egypt and the role they play in connecting people across borders. Prime Minister Modi's visit to the Heliopolis War Memorial marked a poignant moment of remembrance and solidarity. Located in the heart of Heliopolis, this memorial stands as a testament to the sacrifices made by brave soldiers who fought valiantly in wars gone by. Paying homage to the brave soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice during First World War, Prime Minister Modi laid wreaths at the memorial.
This is the place where soldiers from the Second and First World War have been laid to rest. Prime Minister visited this place. He offered his condolences to all the soldiers and Indian soldier in particular.
PM also visited the Pyramid of Giza. This historic visit serves as a powerful symbol of the enduring ties between India and Egypt and solidifies diplomatic ties, celebrates cultural heritage, paving the way for a stronger alliance between India and Egypt. With Vishal Baristo in Cairo, Bureau Report, DD India.
So now let's get to the big takeaways from Prime Minister Modi's US as well as Egypt visit. First of all, he of course went to the United States. PM Modi held talks with President Joe Biden in Washington, D.C. and these discussions focused on consolidating bilateral cooperation and engagement in plurilateral forums such as the G20 or the Quad or the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity or IPEF as it is known. One of the key elements of this discussion was also on space, and in fact NASA and ISRO have agreed to develop a strategic framework for human spaceflight cooperation by the end of this year. Under this, NASA will train Indian astronauts with the goal of mounting a joint mission to the International Space Station in 2024, and India joined the Artemis Accords, which lays out the principles for cooperation in the civil exploration and use of Moon, Mars, comets and asteroids for peaceful purposes. Now, one of the big deals that came out of this visit was, of course, the GE jet engine manufacturing deal with tech transfer with India's Hindustan Aeronautics Limited or HAL, which is basically a trailblazing initiative between the two nations. It reflects India's emergence as a hub for maintenance and repair. Now, the two countries, India and the US, also launched what is called the US-India New and Emerging Renewable Energy Technologies Action Platform. It is basically to deepen cooperation in the area of green hydrogen, offshore and onshore wind and other emerging technologies. This was about United States, of course, the joint address, the state dinner, everything was there, hugs and diplomacy in that visit that Prime Minister made to the United States. His next stop was in Egypt, and what happened there? An agreement to elevate the bilateral relationship to a strategic partnership was signed by the two leaders, Prime Minister Modi and President Al-Sisi. Prime Minister and President Sisi also discussed further cooperation in G20, highlighting the issues of food and energy insecurity, climate change, and the need for the global south to have a concerted voice, extremely important in the kind of geopolitical change we have seen in the past few years. Now, 3 MOUs in the fields of agriculture, archaeology and antiquities and competition law were also signed during this visit. We of course saw in an unprecedented move, Prime Minister Modi and President Sisi sign those agreements which are usually signed by officials or ministers of the respective departments. So those have been the big takeaways from these two countries which the Prime Minister visited. Let's get more perspective on this. I'm joined by Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar, former ambassador. Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar, welcome. Good evening to DD India. Always good to have a chat with you. We're talking about the big takeaways, the significance of Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US as well as Egypt. Now that he's returned home, he's concluded these two extremely important visits. What have been the big takeaways from the US visit as well as the Egypt visit of Prime Minister Modi for you?
Yes, thank you very much, Priya, and always a pleasure for me also to be with you and have a conversation. So as far as the US visit is concerned, of course, much of the first day was taken up by the International Day of Yoga in New York.
Yeah.
And then he traveled through Washington, D.C., where he had a private dinner first and then an event in which Dr. Jill Biden, the wife of President Joe Biden, she participated. But coming to the big takeaways, I think, both India and the United States are really at the relationship is at a really at a takeoff stage, because I think technology was the flavor of the visit. But there were, I could see more than about 20-25 areas in which both the countries have agreed that they will collaborate in the area of technology. You would recall, Shreya, that in the past, it was always, the United States was always rather reluctant to share its cutting edge technology with India. But recent, developments, there has been a radical change, and in all the sectors, whether it is in semiconductor chips or manufacture of semiconductor chips, we have Micron Inc. They said they promised to put in $825 million of investment in India. Another, the total enterprise would be about $2.75 billion. Google Alphabet has said that they would be investing about $10 billion. So many of these companies, Microsoft, Applied Materials, Lam, there are so many companies that have agreed to invest in India and bring in the latest technology with them. And that, I think, is the real big takeaway, that the United States seems to have decided that it wants to catapult India into that segment of high technology countries. And so that is why, whether it is, you mentioned about space, you mentioned about green energy, whether it is 5G, 6G, it is quantum computing, it is AI, all these are fields in which decisions were taken that the United States would share its technology with India. And of course, multi-billion investments can be, we can foresee them coming into India.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, what changed this perspective from being hesitant in transferring and sharing technology to now taking and perceiving India as one of the most favorable investment destinations? What changed this perspective over the past decades?
Yeah, excellent question. I think One is the changing geopolitical situation, the huge
Yeah.
flux and churn that is taking place in the world, and the very competent manner in which India has dealt with these changes. The two black swan events that have taken place in recent years, one is the COVID-19 pandemic, and then since last year it is the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So all the countries, including of course developing but also developed countries, have also been afflicted by shortages of food, of fertilizer, of energy, increase in inflation, debt, etc. But India has been able to handle all these aspects quite confidently and comfortably. And, as the Prime Minister said in one of his addresses, 9 years ago, when he had first come to the United States as the Prime Minister, India was the 10th largest economy in the world, and today it is the 5th largest economy, and very soon going to become the 3rd largest economy. So I think one is the performance of India, that it has become a sort of an indispensable partner and a partner of choice as far as major powers and economies in the world are concerned. And second, I think also is the fact that the United States today, of course, it is the most preeminent power in the world. It has the largest economy, $26 trillion. In terms of the military budget, $800+ billion, which is more than the budget of the next 10 countries put together. So militarily, technologically, economically, and in terms of global influence, it is the preeminent power. But still, the rise of China has been very significant, and in terms of, at least in terms of the economy, China is also trying to catch up with the United States. It is about $15–16 trillion. So I think the United States is looking for partners. India is a very strong partner. India is not an ally. And of course, the aggression that we see in China, assertiveness we see in China, not only on the border line of actual control with India, but also in the South China Sea, in the Taiwan Straits, in the East China Sea. That is a matter of very serious concern for many countries, including the United States and India. And so both these countries have come together. And of course, as far as India is concerned, it would like to grow, it would like to become stronger, it would like to become more powerful country and provide a better standard of living for its people. And for that, it needs, Shreya, it needs capital, it needs technology, it needs big markets, and that is what the United States can provide it. So I think there are all these changes. Both of them, both these countries now share not only similar values, but there is also a convergence of interests as far as the countries are concerned, and that is why they are working together so very assiduously.
Right. There's also a common challenge of the climate change impact that India and US and the entire world are facing, and we know that one of the key priorities for India's G20 presidency is climate change and climate action. Now, G20 being a developed and developing country grouping, it's an interesting grouping because every country is at a different level when it comes to its contribution to climate change, its action towards climate change, and of course the kind of finance that it would need to deal with the ripple effects of climate change. In terms of that, Ambassador Sajjanhar, how can India really sort of push its case and the case of the global south towards developed nations such as the US in saying that, developed nations have more responsibility towards climate action and climate finance than developing countries that need to grow now?
Yeah, you're very right. And I think India has been spearheading the case of the developing countries in all the negotiations that have been taking place. So whether the principle of CBDR, common but differentiated responsibility, but respective capability, I think this is something that was agreed to in the Kyoto Protocol, and India has been a very strong votary of that. Also, you would recall that even in the Paris Accord COP21, which took place in 2015, India is one of the few countries, I think the only G20 country, which is meeting its commitments under the Paris Accord. India has committed that it is going to produce 500 gigawatts of energy through renewable means by 2030, and India is well on the path of that. India has also launched a number of initiatives like the International Solar Alliance, in which I understand that there are more than 100 countries which have become members, and also the CDRI, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. So these are all initiatives in that direction. You would also recall, Shreya, that in COP26 in Glasgow 2 years ago, 2021, Prime Minister Modi had launched what is come to be known as Mission Life, that is lifestyle for environment. That is, it is not only the responsibility of the governments to ensure that climate is protected and we take action against, to protect the climate, but it is the responsibility of each and every individual. And all of us need to work together and change our lifestyles in terms of our consumption, in terms of, preservation when we are using electricity, that we use energy efficient systems, platforms, and each one of us makes a change in our lifestyle, in our living habits, so that we are able to preserve energy and protect the environment. So I think India has taken a large number of new initiatives. So while in the past India always used to be on the defensive, I think today in the area of climate, India is taking very progressive and forward-looking initiatives.
Right. Let me also talk about his Egypt visit, Ambassador Sajjanhar. You know, we had the Prime Minister meet with President Al-Sisi. The Prime Minister was heartwarmingly conferred with the Order of the Nile, which is the highest civilian honor by the Egyptian government. And, aside from this, of course, we also saw him meeting with business leaders of Egypt and holding bilateral talks with President Sisi and visiting some of the iconic sites that reflect really the kind of strong relationship that India and Egypt have shared. From his Egypt visit, what were the big deliverables that you took away from PM's visit?
You know, India is we have emerged as the voice of the global south, as a leader of the developing countries. And Egypt is an extremely important developing country. It's a large country. It has a population of more than 100 million. Geographically, it is situated at it's a very strategic location. It is at the confluence at the meeting point between Africa and West Asia and Asia. It is also situated next to the, just across the Red Sea and with the Suez Canal and the Mediterranean. So it's a route to Europe. So its geographical location is extremely strategic. And it can serve as a conduit for trade, for connectivity with Africa as also with Europe. And we have, of course, had historical relations right after India's independence. So Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and President Gamal Abdel Nasser, so they were extremely leaders of the non-aligned movement. But in recent years, Shreya, this relationship has been stagnating. For instance, it would come as some surprise to your viewers that this visit by the Prime Minister was the first by an Indian Prime Minister, first bilateral visit in 26 years. So it is extremely good that that Prime Minister Modi went there at the first available opportunity. I must, of course, mention that, in 2020, Prime Minister Modi was to go there, visit Egypt, but he could not go because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it was the Prime Minister's first visit and first by an Indian Prime Minister after 26 years. And there was the decision was taken between the two leaders to upgrade the relationship to a strategic partnership. You would recall that President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was the chief guest at our Republic Day celebrations in January early this year. And before that, he has visited India twice, once in 2015 for the India-Africa Forum, and then in 2016 for a state visit. So this was his, he has been to India 3 times, and in fact, before him in 2013, President Morsi from Egypt had come. So 4 presidential visits from Egypt had taken place. But areas of renewable energy, areas of agriculture and food processing, areas how India can put in investments in the Suez Canal economic zone. So I think there were all these areas, and the most important that you mentioned very correctly was, which was signed by Prime Minister Modi and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. It was the strategic partnership agreement between the two countries, and I think that is what is really taken the relationship to the next level.
Sure. All right, we'll leave it there. Ambassador Ashok Sajjanha, thank you very much for joining us on DD India this evening and sharing your perspective on the big takeaways and deliverables from Prime Minister Modi's US and Egypt visit.
Thank you.
All right, let's shift focus and get you updates from the Russia-Ukraine conflict now. As the Wagner group pulled out of Rostov on Sunday, residents erupted in joy less than 24 hours after the group attempted a rebellion. More details in this report.
Residents of Rostov-on-Don in Russia erupted in cheers as Wagner's troops pulled out of the city early Sunday, less than 24 hours after attempting a rebellion. The rapidly escalating events began with an extraordinary announcement on Friday night by Prigozhin, who called for an uprising against Russia's military leaders. He claimed that Russian generals had ordered an airstrike on his fighters in Ukraine and claimed a huge number had been killed, though he provided no evidence. In a telegram message, he promised to go to the end to stop the Russian leadership's evil. Prigozhin said he had 25,000 fighters ready to battle the Russian army and called on regular Russian soldiers, including the National Guard, to join his coup attempt. The Wagner boss's troops then marched into Russia's Rostov region, with Prigozhin promising that his soldiers would destroy everything that gets in the way. But later it all ended. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said on Monday that the aborted mutiny by Russia's Wagner mercenary group at the weekend demonstrated the scale of the Kremlin's strategic mistake in waging war on Ukraine.
The events over the weekend are an internal Russian matter, and yet another demonstration of the big strategic mistake that President Putin made with his legal annexation of Crimea and the war against Ukraine. As Russia continues its assault, it is even more important to continue our support to Ukraine.
European Union foreign ministers on Monday said an aborted mutiny in Russia at the weekend showed Moscow's war in Ukraine was causing domestic instability and undermining its military power, but stressed their focus remained on supporting Kiev.
That it's more important than ever to continue supporting Ukraine, because what has happened during this weekend shows that the war against Ukraine is cracking Russian power and affecting its political system. We are certainly following closely what's happening, but it's now the moment to continue supporting Ukraine more than ever, and that's what we will do.
Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu appeared for the first time since a deal was struck on June 24th to end what the authorities had called an armed mutiny by the Wagner mercenary group aimed at ousting him. In a video by the Russian Defense Ministry, Shoigu was shown flying in a plane with a colleague and hearing reports at a command post run by Russia's Zapad West military grouping. World Today Desk, DD India.
All right, let's connect with Dasha Chernyshova, who is in Moscow right now, and she's been tracking this conflict and the latest on that. Dasha, good evening from New Delhi. That dust around this internal rebellion that happened in Moscow has finally settled. I hope so. But what has been the latest situation right now? Monday was declared as a non-working day. What have been the people saying? Get us all the latest that is happening in Moscow today.
Well, indeed, the counterterrorism operations regime that has been introduced following the start of what Yevgeny Prigozhin has described as the March of Justice has been lifted in Moscow, the capital of Russia, as well as in Moscow region, in Voronezh region, and the fighters of the Wagner mercenary group have left towards their positions in Lugansk People's Republic. Yevgeny Prigozhin himself was forced to leave for Belarus as part of this deal that has been arranged by the Belarusian president Alexander Lukashenko. So at the moment, we understand the Russian authorities are trying to assess the situation, but the situation is stabilizing. We've seen the first appearance of Sergei Shoigu, Russia's Minister of Defense, in the area of the so-called special military operation, inspecting the operations on the ground and giving the instructions. We also have seen the Russian President Vladimir Putin releasing the first video in which he appeared to talk to the engineers of Russia, stressing that the modernization of the industry was Russia's top priority. Also, very interestingly, there was the first interview just minutes ago given by Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, in which he said that everything has already been said about the deal that has been arranged between Yevgeny Prigozhin and the Kremlin. Some of the remarks of Sergei Lavrov suggest that many of the colleagues that have been talking to him over the course of this weekend have supported Moscow. They have expressed their solidarity and certainty that Moscow would not allow to undermine the government's unity. We also have heard from Sergei Lavrov saying that there was the contact between Moscow and the US ambassador to Russia, Lynn Tracy. In those contacts, he said Lynn Tracy has raised concerns with regards to Russia's nuclear weapons, saying that she hoped they would be fine. And also he reiterated that the Western countries saw chaos in Russia as a window for opportunity, because Moscow strongly believes that the Western countries are waging a hybrid war against Russia. Lavrov has also added that the Russian special services are investigating whether Western special services were one way or another involved in the events of June 24.
Dasha, did Sergei Lavrov also say anything about whether the Wagner group is officially out of the Russia-Ukraine war, or is it still going to operate after a few days? Any word on that?
Well, what we have heard was that the work of the instructors who have been working in the Central African Republic would continue. He said there are about several thousand personnel who are working there, but very importantly, Sergei Lavrov has been trying to make sure that the situation is under control. So it's not immediately clear whether Wagner fighters would be involved in the operations of the so-called special military operation in Ukraine, but certainly the understanding in Moscow is that Wagner fighters should be separated now from the head of the group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was the one, according to Moscow, plotting this turmoil.
Right, Dasha, I'm sure this rebellion shocked a lot of people, not just across the world, but within Russia as well. Russian citizens, didn't expect this to happen. But today, as you told us, the defense minister was at the front line. Clearly, Russia is trying to send out a message to not just its military, its soldiers on the ground, but the entire world. Has that message been successfully conveyed? Do you see there is a change in perception now?
Well, it would appear that we are back to normal, because we have regularly been seeing the releases by Russia's Ministry of Defense, the briefings about what's happening in the area of the operation, the updates on the activities of the Russian army there, and sometimes the videos, the footage of the Minister of Defense traveling to the area of the special military operation or to the industrial plants that are responsible for the production of the military armor. Now, we have seen this video that was the first footage since the start of this rebellion, and many experts here suggest that was a hint that no changes to the staffing of Russia's Ministry of Defense would be made, because that was one of the demands of Yevgeny Prigozhin.
All right, Dasha, now that we have the Wagner Group travel to Belarus out of Moscow, this kind of, rebellion within the Russian side, does it reflect a change in the course of war from the Russian side right now? Of course, they have been taken aback. They must be strategizing and re-strategizing, considering also the fact that the Ukrainian side has been going on with its counter-offensive.
Well, as we understand from the Russian officials, they do insist that the course of the Russian special military operation will not be affected by what happened in Russia over the course of the weekend. That has been the suggestion from all the governmental officials, and they have all been stressing that the unity of the government has to be preserved, and the goals, the strategic ones, are still in place. So certainly the Russian officials are trying to maintain that line. Speaking of the Russians themselves, I would suggest that there has been quite strong certainty that the Russian authorities would be able to bring everything under their control. However, of course, this situation is quite indicative that there has to be legislation introduced to regulate the work of the private military groups, such as the Wagner mercenary group. And we understand that the Russian lawmakers are now working on that to eliminate this gray zone.
All right, we'll leave it there. Dasha Chernysheва, thank you very much for joining us with those inputs from Moscow. Let's also now, tell you more about the history of the Wagner Group, and more importantly, the man in the center of all of this, that is Yevgeny Prigozhin, the chief of the Wagner Group, which is now, by the way, is in Belarus. First of all, Dmitry Utkin. Who is this man? He's a veteran of Russia's wars in Chechnya, and he is thought to have been Wagner's first field commander and to have named the group after his former radio call sign. We all know that the current head is Yevgeny Prigozhin, who's a rich businessman, also nicknamed as Putin's chef. More on that later as I explain. Now, Prigozhin is thought to make money from these Wagner Group operations. The US Treasury says that he uses its presence to enrich mining companies which he owns, and it has placed them under sanctions. So let's understand, who is Yevgeny Prigozhin? Well, he was first criminally convicted in 1979 when he was just 18 years old and got a suspended 2.5-year sentence for theft. 2 years later, he was sentenced to 13 years in jail for robbery and theft, 9 of which he served behind bars. Now, upon his release from jail, Prigozhin set up a chain of stalls, interestingly, selling hot dogs in Russia's St. Petersburg. Business went well, and within a few years, in the lawless Russia of the 1990s, Prigozhin was able to open expensive restaurants across the city. Now, it was there in these expensive restaurants that he began mixing with the high and mighty of St. Petersburg as well as the whole of Russia. Now, one of his restaurants, called New Island, was a boat sailing up and down the Neva River of Russia. Vladimir Putin, it is believed, liked it so much that after becoming the president, he started taking his foreign guests to that restaurant. And that is most likely, it is believed, how the two first met each other. Years later, Prigozhin's catering company Concord was contracted to supply food to the Kremlin, earning him the nickname of Putin's chef. Firms affiliated with Prigozhin also won lucrative catering contracts from the military as well as state-run schools of Russia. So that was about the man. But what about the group? When did the Wagner Group first operate in Russia? This was during the annexation of Crimea back in 2014. Where else has the Wagner Group operated? Well, since 2015, Wagner Group mercenaries have been in Syria fighting alongside pro-government forces and guarding oil fields in the country. There are also Wagner Group mercenaries in Libya supporting the forces loyal to General Khalifa Haftar. In fact, the Central African Republic has invited the Wagner Group to guard diamond mines within the country, and it is thought to be guarding gold mines in Sudan as well. The Malian government in West Africa is using the Wagner Group against Islamic militants group as well. So this by far has been the history of the man and his group, which have now traveled to Belarus after that very short-term rebellion that happened, short-term but highly impactful, not just in Russia, but in changing the course of the Russia-Ukraine conflict and, of course, The whole world is watching this situation closely in shock. We'll keep getting you the latest from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but also let's talk about Greece now, where Kyriakos Mitsotakis has won yet another term as Greece's Prime Minister. Our next report gets you more on the man and his promises to Greek citizens.
Reformist Kyriakos Mitsotakis has secured yet another term. Greece's conservative New Democracy Party stormed to victory in a parliamentary election on Sunday, with voters giving him another 4-year term as Prime Minister. It was more than 20 points clear of Syriza, a radical leftist party that won the elections in 2015 at the peak of the debilitating debt crisis and ran the country until 2019, when it lost to New Democracy.
The citizens have many problems and they demand that we give our full attention to those problems and solve them. And today, I am the Prime Minister of all Greeks and I express the expectations even of the citizens that did not vote for us. From tomorrow, hard work begins so that we can take Greece even further forward.
55-year-old Mitsotakis, a former banker and scion of a powerful political family, has promised to boost revenue from the vital tourist industry, create jobs and increase wages to near the European Union average. Mitsotakis, who was Prime Minister from 2019 until stepping down in favor of a caretaker premier following an inconclusive May vote, has vowed to push ahead with reforms to rebuild the country's credit rating after the debt crisis that racked the nation for a decade. Let's understand the election process in Greece. Parties need to secure at least 3% of the vote to enter parliament for a 4-year term. The share of the vote needed to secure a majority with 151 seats in the 300-member parliament depends on how the overall result is divided between parties. Under this system, the threshold for outright victory depends on how many votes go to parties that fail to clear the 3% entry benchmark. The votes of the parties that do not cross the 3% threshold are divided among those that cross it on a proportional basis. Greece has not seen a 46% vote result in elections in 3 decades. Greece abolished a 50-seat premium granted to the winning party in 2016, a reform suggested by the then leftist government. Members of parliament are elected from lists of party candidates and for geographical constituencies. Voters in Athens region and Piraeus, where a third of the country's 11 million population live, elect 89 deputies. The new electoral system grants a bonus of between 25 to 50 seats to the winning party depending on its performance. 25th June's vote was the second in the past 5 weeks, as the first poll on May 21 held under a different electoral system failed to give a single party absolute majority in parliament. The system used in this poll gave the leading party bonus seats depending on voter support. The COVID-19 pandemic and a deadly rail crash in February exposed shortcomings in Greece's health and public transport systems, but a cost of living crisis and economic hardship have more recently topped voters' concerns. World Today Desk, DD India.
Now, Kyriakos Mitsotakis has been sworn in for another term as Greece's Prime Minister, as we told you, after thumping election win over the weekend. His centre-right New Democracy Party clinched a majority in the parliament after falling short of that mark in previous elections in May. Our Southern Europe correspondent Gilles Gibson reports from Rome. Well, we will of course get you that report, but let's also tell you that Greece has chosen its Prime Minister again, and that is in Mitsotakis, and why a lot of observers say that he has been able to bring back Greece from the kind of economic loss that countries across the world faced during the COVID-19 pandemic, and then of course the shocking Russia-Ukraine conflict. All of that contributed to, of course, Greece's poor economic health, but Mitsotakis has been credited with bringing Greece back to a healthy economy. Let's get you that report on how he won that election.
Well, the gamble that Kyriakos Mitsotakis took in calling these fresh elections has really paid off, because his New Democracy Party now holds 158 seats out of a total 300 in the Greek parliament, giving it a clear majority. as he sat down with the Greek president to take on his official mandate to form a new government, Mitsotakis said that we will realise the big changes that the country needs. He had campaigned a lot on economic issues, pledging, for example, to rebuild Greece's credit rating, which has really been in the doldrums since the start of the Greek debt crisis more than a decade ago. Meanwhile, this was a devastating result for the left-wing Syriza party, which was in government between 2015 and 2019 and is led by the former Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras. He described this as negative for democracy and society, but his party was more than 20 points behind the New Democracy Party. Meanwhile, there was a result which really surprised many analysts in this election, and that was the fact that the little-known Spartans Party, which campaigned on a very hard-line right-wing message on immigration, actually managed to win several seats in Parliament. Of course, in the final weeks of campaigning before Election Day, we saw that tragic incident with that boat carrying hundreds of migrants sinking off the coast of Greece. Dozens of people have been confirmed dead and hundreds are still missing. And that really threw immigration and asylum back into the heart of the political debate and gave that little-known Spartans Party a boost going into Election Day. Giles Gibson in Rome reporting for DD India.
Well, with that, let's get you all the sporting action now. Deepika is getting us all the sport updates. Deepika, good evening, over to you.
Thanks and good evening, Shreya. Let's quickly take a look at all that is passing in the world of sports and Sports Today of World Today. To bring you the latest from the world of soccer, Ilkay Gundogan will join Barcelona on a free transfer from treble winners Manchester City. The Catalan side confirmed that Gundogan will leave City after captaining the English club to the Premier League, FA Cup and Champions League last season. Ending a successful 7-year stint in England where he won 14 trophies including 5 league titles, Gundogan leaves Manchester having made more than 300 appearances and scoring 60 goals. His experience will be invaluable to Barcelona's coach Xavi Hernandez after the Spanish side's long-serving and trusted midfield general Sergio Busquets left the club at the end of the season after 18 years with the Catalan outfit. Now, Barcelona won the La Liga title last season but failed to get out of the group stage in the Champions League while they were knocked out in the semi-finals of the Copa del Rey. Moving on now, let's get you an update from the recently concluded Special Olympics. Well, parents play a pivotal role in the success of athletes with intellectual disabilities, providing unwavering support that transforms them into champions. Their unconditional love, dedication and belief in their children's ability have proven to be the driving force behind these athletes' triumphs on the global stage. Now, here's an exclusive story by sports correspondent Narayan Singh showcasing the transformative impact of parental support. Take a look.
The Indian athletes' triumphant performance at the Special Olympics in Berlin not only exemplified their incredible talent but also highlighted the unwavering support and dedication of their parents. These extraordinary parents, who face a myriad of challenges, played a pivotal role in nurturing their children's abilities and transforming them into champion athletes. Parents of athletes with intellectual disabilities often encounter unique obstacles on their journey to success. From the moment of diagnosis, they face societal misconceptions, limited resources, and emotional uncertainties.
Challenges तो शुरू हो जाते हैं जब बच्चा डायग्नोज हो जाता है स्पेशल कि हाँ जब डायग्नोज होता है 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4 साल तक पता चल जाता है कि आपका बच्चा स्पेशल है. उसमें इतने बिहेवियर्स आ जाते हैं कि पेरेंट्स को समझ ही नहीं आती कि ये क्या है. ओके, सो मेरे साथ भी यही हुआ था. जब पता लगा कि बच्चा मेरा स्पेशल है तो मेरे को चारों तरफ से अंधेरा ही अंधेरा दिख रहा था कि कहाँ जाएं, क्या करें. मैंने लाखों रुपया इसकी थेरेपीज़ के लिए स्पेंड किया कि सब कह रहे हैं ऑक्यूपेशन थेरेपी करा लो, स्पीच थेरेपी करा लो, बच्चा बिल्कुल आपका नॉर्मल हो जाएगा. पर ये मेरे हिसाब से मुझे ये सारी बातें गलत लगी. इसमें सबसे ज़्यादा इम्प्रूवमेंट आया स्पोर्ट्स एक्टिविटीज़ में. जब मैंने इसको डाला, ये था तब 9 साल का. जैसे इसने स्पोर्ट्स एक्टिविटी शुरू करी, इसका स्लीपिंग पैटर्न ठीक हो गया, स्पोर्ट्स ये नेशनल कैंप्स अटेंड करने से इस बच्चे ने सबसे बड़ी इम्प्रूवमेंट आई जिसमें उसने कम्युनिकेशन सीख लिया। इसको बोलना नहीं आता था, अपनी बात रखनी नहीं आती थी, इसमें वेटिंग नहीं था। इसने स्पेशल ओलंपिक में जा के साइन लैंग्वेज सीखा, टॉयलेट कैसे जाना है, वेटिंग सीखा, खाना लेना लाइन में लग के, ये सारी इम्प्रूवमेंट इसको स्पोर्ट्स एक्टिविटीज़ में इन्वॉल्व होने के बाद मिली।
Special Olympics Bharat, the Indian chapter of the Special Olympics movement, has been playing a pivotal role in supporting and empowering parents of athletes with intellectual disabilities. With a focus on creating a nurturing environment, the organization has been playing an instrumental role in providing much needed assistance and resources to parents, ensuring their children have every opportunity to excel in sports and in life.
बहुत मेहनत की है। Thanks to Special Olympic Bharat for giving them the opportunity and Sai Sports Authority who have given them the best facilities, and thank you very much.
The support and love offered by these parents extend far beyond the physical and financial aspects. They become their children's pillars of strength, offering emotional support, encouragement and motivation. In the face of setbacks and obstacles, these parents instill in their children the belief that no dream is unattainable, providing the foundation for their remarkable achievements.
Personally, that bringing up these kind of special children needs a lot of motivation, lot of dedication which is required. I think we are the only parents which we need to support the children. If we do not support them, it is very difficult for these children to really cope up, take up this kind of a stress. But I think I'm very happy that our child has been able to, perform in these sports, and I think I'm very thankful to the federation, the RSFI, which from Karnataka, RSFI India, including the SAI, which is your Sports Authority of India, who have kind of actually motivated the children to perform, supporting them to raise up to this level. I think that's amazing, and I think the arrangements which have been made at Berlin is far better than anything which I could ever look at it.
From an early age, these parents recognize and nurture their children's talents. They explore opportunities, seek specialized training, and connect with coaches who understand their children's unique needs. By providing access to the right resources and support networks, parents create a foundation for their children's athletic journey. Their victory shows that the dedication of parents is an invaluable asset on the journey of becoming champion athlete.
Indian athletes' triumphant campaign at the Special Olympics in Berlin stand as a testament to the indomitable spirit of athletes with intellectual disabilities and the unwavering support of their parents. Their remarkable achievements have not only made their families proud, but have also propelled India to the forefront of inclusive sports on the global stage. The legacy of these athletes and their parents will continue to inspire generations to come, forging a path towards a more inclusive world where all individuals can achieve their fullest potential. With camera person K.T. Rao, Narayan Singh, DD India, Berlin.
And the next opportunity for all these athletes comes in 2025. With this, it's a toss back to you, Shreya.
Thanks, Deepika, for all those updates. And now on World Today, let's shift our focus and get you news that doesn't make it to the headlines, but actually is impacting lives around the world.
A 7-year-old Chinese crested hairless has claimed the title as world's ugliest dog. Scooter scooted his way to victory on Friday in Petaluma, California. Thousands of paddlers descended on Hong Kong on Saturday to take part in the financial hub's International Dragon Boat competition, held for the first time in more than 4 years after they were halted due to anti-government protests and COVID-19. The 3-day Dragon Boat Festival holiday saw a huge bounce back in tourism across China from the pandemic-impacted previous year, with major cities registering significant surges both in traveller flow and consumption. Film and television directors voted overwhelmingly to ratify a new 3-year labor contract with major Hollywood studios on Friday, averting a second work stoppage that would have added to upheaval caused by an ongoing writers' strike. World Today Desk, DD India.
And after that, let's go back into the past and see what made news on this day.
On this day in the year 1945, the United Nations Charter was signed by 50 nations in San Francisco, creating a successor to the League of Nations. It became effective on October 24th. 4 years of planning and the hope of many years had materialized in an international organization designed to end war and promote peace, justice and better living for all mankind. In the year 1960, British Somaliland became independent. 5 days later, it merged with the Italian Somaliland to become the Somali Republic. The state of Somaliland formally achieved its independence from the United Kingdom on June 26, 1960. On this day in the year 1988, Air France Airbus A320 crashed near Mulhouse, France. A fire broke out, killing 3 occupants. The Mulhouse Flying Club had requested Air France to perform a flyby at their air show at Mulhouse Habsheim Airport. On this day in the year 2006, US billionaire Warren Buffett donated roughly $30.7 billion to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, uniting the world's 2 richest people in a bid to fight disease, reduce poverty and improve education. In the year 2017, Captain Megan Kutho of the 2nd Battalion, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, becomes the first female infantry officer to command Queen's Guard at the Buckingham Palace. World Today Desk, DD India.
With that, it's a wrap in World Today. News and updates will continue on the other side as well. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.